Hello everybody, and thanks for sticking with me during my hiatus. Had a few tech-related problems, but all the hardware has been reconfigured and or replaced, the software has been reloaded, and we're ready to go again. Today, I'm going to be looking at a game which has slipped under many folks' radar. No, not that one. F*** that. That's not a game. It's a blight on our proud heritage. More details on that in a link in the video description. Now, what I'm here to talk to you about today is Alan Wake, a psychological action thriller by Remedy Entertainment, best known for their Max Payne games, and of course published by everybody's favourite company, Microsoft. Before we get stuck into analysing every detail of Alan Wake, I'd just like to say that I think this is going to be a very divisive game. Personally, I love it, but for the same reasons that I do, many people are going to be put off. So this is going to be a little bit of a hodgepodge as I try to explain why certain elements of the game are really good, but at the same time where they're going to frighten some people away. So, that little aside over, let's take a look at Alan Wake. You play the character Alan Wake, a writer who's headed off with his wife to a small town in the sticks to relax and hopefully break a nasty writer's block he's had for the past couple of years. However, things head south very quickly as Alice, Wake's wife, is kidnapped by an unknown force. Beyond that, we're getting into spoiler territory, but the whole game plays out like a homage to the world's most famous, though not necessarily best, thriller and horror writers. The characters and the general feel of Alan Wake has a very Stephen King kind of feel to it. But the meta plot and the supernatural elements are far closer to Wes Craven. It's not really ripping off either of these authors, but the influence is very clear throughout the game. There are also nods to other famous, or infamous depending on your opinion, horror games and books, such as A Tree Called the Great Old One, a clear nod to Lovecraftian, A Magician Called Phantasmagoria, a game which I'm sure many of you will remember from the good old FMV eras of CD-ROM, and of course direct references to some of the more famous films such as Evil Dead, Poltergeist, and there's even a Jack Nicholson Shining moment in there. They're mostly done very subtly though, and so subtly that some of them might actually be accidents, but they don't break immersion even when you do have a taken trying to hack through the door with an axe. The pacing is very well done, but sudden cuts between scenes could break your engagement with the game. In all fairness, the developers might have been relying on loading times here, but because I installed the game to my hard drive, the loading time was next to zero. Twitch gamers will hate Alan Wake, because a fair amount of game time is given over to building atmosphere, story and character, especially during the first 2 hours of the game. Towards the end, the plot speeds up a lot, and this can be a little confusing as the writers try to wrap everything up. That said though, Alan Wake's story is very well presented and a great example of how storytelling should be done in an interactive medium. Alan Wake is odd. It combines the brilliant atmosphere and pacing of Silent Hill with gameplay that's not all that dissimilar to Resident Evil 5 or even Dead Space. However, where Resi 5 decided to give up on its survival horror roots, Alan Wake manages to combine smooth control and fast-paced combat with a scary and haunting atmosphere. At first, the Taken, the enemies in the game, are pretty scary, but once you get used to the game's mechanics and controls, the fear they induce gives way to a healthier caution. That's not to say that Alan Wake gets less frightening once you get good at it. Every fight is still tense and you need to stay on your toes, and little set pieces pop up frequently that will scare the crap out of you. But the real element of the horror is encapsulated not in sudden shocks or things jumping out at you, or even the fast-paced combat, but right where it should be, the atmosphere. While there are single moments in Alan Wake that may make you jump, the music, the lighting, the camera work and the foreshadowing are done perfectly, and they are what will keep you on the edge of your seat, exactly what a good horror game should be. There's a good spread of weapons and ammo, perhaps a little bit too much for a horror game, but I was playing it on normal difficulty. Speaking of which, this is one of those games where there is no easy mode, it's normal, hard and nightmare. I always play my games on normal difficulty because I like a bit of a challenge, but at the same time I don't want to be throwing my control pad across the room. So this is kind of annoying for me. If I'm playing it on normal, am I actually playing it on easy? I don't know, I don't get it. Anyway, there are also environmental hazards that can help you destroy the Taken, such as dangling electric wires and of course the ever-present exploding barrels, and one or two simple puzzles pop up in the game as well. These aren't particularly demanding and they don't occur particularly often, so don't be put off if you don't like puzzles. The combat is very, very basic, but it's effective. You use light, either from your torch, flares, or some other source of light somewhere in the environment, to burn off an enemy's shield. You can then use your standard firearms to finish them off. Whilst they've still got the shield, which you need to destroy with the light, they're invulnerable to normal firearms. You can also use light in other ways. If you have a flare, you can fire it up, put it on the ground, and the Taken won't approach the light source, so you can drive them back, giving you a little bit of room to reload, manoeuvre, or just catch your breath. The way the controls work and the mechanics fit together means you end up with fast-paced action, but you still need to be tactically aware to ensure that you don't get flanked. If you do get into close combat, there's a very nice dodge mechanic that can help you out too. There are only 4 different types of enemy, 5 if you include possessed objects, which just get thrown randomly at you. But remember, the emphasis here is on atmosphere and storytelling, not on the combat. There's plenty of combat in it though, but that's not going to satisfy Halo fanboys and Counter-Strike players. This is going to be a big turn-off for many people. I can't stress this enough. Alan Wake is geared towards the story, the characters, and the atmosphere. If you don't like these things, or you prefer your games to be one long stream of carnage and dead aliens with 20 different guns and 50 different enemies to shoot them at, Alan Wake's not going to be for you. It wouldn't be fair to call Alan Wake's graphics bad. They are certainly below par though. Just look at this piece.
Everything's fine.
Wake's wife looks downright bizarre, and the lip syncing is just horrible. To be fair though, most of the characters don't suffer from this, but it does mean that sequences with Alice in them can be a little jarring and break the immersion. Beyond that though, most of the game is also a little shabby around the edges. Most of it takes place in the dark, so it's not a huge issue, but when it is light, or when you're shining your torch on something, you often notice something here, something there, which just doesn't look quite right. And not in the suspenseful horror sort of way, it just looks odd. To be fair though, the graphics aren't terrible, and they are pretty consistent, meaning that you get used to the shabby edges after a while. Aside from the actual graphics quality though, the general design is really nice. Buildings look real and the architecture meshes flawlessly with the phases the game's going through at the time. You get nice, clean-cut little villages when you're walking around during the daylight, and a lot of the night sequences take place in dark woods or abandoned ghost towns. Check this bit out. And you just had to run through that place. There are also some very nice touches in the visual cues, not all that dissimilar from the way that Silent Hill would warn you when something was about to happen, and if you pay close attention to Alan Wake you can pick up on these little things and get ready when something wicked this way comes. Alan Wake's sound quality is, on the whole, pretty good. The voice acting is solid, but not exceptional. The music does a great job of enhancing the atmosphere, and the sounds of the Taken moving around in the woods will put chills down your spine. Like with the graphics, there are also certain audio cues that predict what's coming next if you pay attention, meaning you need to keep your ears as well as your eyes peeled. The soundtrack is there, I suppose. It's a lot like the way the Watchmen movie tried to take popular songs and stick them over certain sequences, but sometimes it just jars. It doesn't do it very often, and sometimes it meshes really well, so I suppose that cancels out. And it's something different which hasn't been done in that many video games, so I suppose it's a good thing. But to be honest, I really can't say anything. The soundtrack is just there. Alan Wake is a triumph of story and substance. The game mechanics are solid, the characters feel real, the plot gets a little convoluted towards the end, but not seriously so, and the whole package is just dripping in atmosphere. To really appreciate this game, you can't play it casually. Turn off the lights, play it alone, and just don't let yourself be distracted by the small flaws that the game has from time to time. If you want an action shooter though, Alan Wake probably isn't for you. That's not to say it's a bad game, but Remedy have created something rather niche, rather than a game designed to please the entire masses. What I'm trying to squeeze out here is a recommendation. It's a really good game, and a game which deserves to be bought. But, sadly, as I've said, it is a niche game, and it's only going to appeal to people who like that kind of game anyway. So, basically what I'm saying is, if you like games like Alan Wake, go out and buy Alan Wake, and if you don't like games like Alan Wake, don't go out and buy Alan Wake. Not particularly helpful, but at the end of the day it's the best I can offer. If you've never tried playing an actual horror game before, or if you've never played Silent Hill, I would definitely recommend trying out Alan Wake. You might find something surprising.